Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Let's get started. I will make this brief because this has already been done, but one of the original founders of Enterprise Knowledge, have been consulting for a very long time, probably too long, and have been working in search since I think it's 2006 is when I first spoke about search and did my first public thing. So this is really an area of passion for me, and it's been fun to watch the change in the search as technology's changed and as our understanding of how search works changes. And I used to talk about action-oriented search, right? Search that helps solve problems. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But what I'm now really, as technology has changed in advance, as these knowledge graphs have become available, it's a lot more about connected search. So let's talk about search itself. How many people love their search? We do workshops. I've worked at close to 100 different search projects, and we do workshops all the time. These are the answers I get, left and right. Why can't search be more like Google? Search would be great, but we don't have time to tag all our documents. It just can't happen, right? It's a constant frustration. Statistics are that I think it's something like 67% of search projects fail. And by the way, failure is an interesting term. Failure means maybe they didn't launch. When you get into how many people are happy with search, that number is not 67%. So how do we fix search? When I talk about search now, I talk about connections. And this is really important. And I'm going to read this. I'm not going to read many of my slides so that I don't bore you to death, but I'm going to read the top of this. The best search experiences connect people to content. They help you find what you're looking for. Or people to information. Information to people, right? Have you thought about that? This information is related to this person. And people to people. Especially when you're talking about an intranet, you're talking about tacit knowledge. We're here at KM World too, right? It's not all that which is written down. You want to find that expert in the room, and they haven't had a chance to write everything down. So how do we create search experiences that help you connect in this way and really help you feel a part of it? Well, there's 4 main ways that we do this. We do this through what we call action-oriented search, which is those rich search results that you see on Google and elsewhere, and I'm going to talk about them. Faceting, built on taxonomies, which you all know, machine learning technology, and knowledge graphs. Now, I do this all the time, so I could talk for an hour on all 4 of these. And I'm not going to, because he's going to throw me off the stage if I go that long. So I'm just going to talk about action-oriented search and knowledge graphs, because they tie nicely together in why knowledge graphs are really, for me, the future as to how you do search. So how many people have heard me talk about action-oriented search before? Anyone know what it is? Okay. Let's think about your search experience. When you're searching for something, the reason you're searching is because you're trying to get a job done and you don't have the information you need to get your job done, right? I've got to get this done. What's the policy? Or I'm trying to write a proposal. I wish I knew what that last one that was similar looked like. So you start off your work annoyed because you can't get your job done. And I used to hear people talk about turning search into find. Finding a set of results isn't good enough. It really isn't. Because is it helping you get your job done? Are we helping you with the steps to finish things? So as you start thinking about doing search the right way, you should be thinking about what is the problem someone's trying to solve and how do they solve it? And if you can do that in search, that's an experience people will like. Now, as I've said all that, I'm going to use another quote that I've kind of gotten excited about, and you'll see more about this. Search is about things, not strings. Anyone heard that before? Yeah. So it used to be I would search for a word and you'd get it back in your search results and a link with a nice little highlighted or underscore. Here's the word you searched for. And that's mildly helpful. We've gotten a long way on that. But what if we actually understood what that word was? What if we treated our search results as I'm looking for a policy and I know this is a policy? I'm looking for a person and I know it's a person. What if I understood that context? How much would that change search? That's one of the things that knowledge graphs and an approach to a rich, action-oriented search helps change. So let's look at some examples of this. And I always like to start with Google, not because it's perfect, but I can't tell you how many customers I go in and go, I wish I could have the Google search experience, right? And then I hear the IT people say, and by the way, I'm an IT geek, so great empathy there. Well, we don't have $2 billion to spend on search development. That can't happen. But there's some things Google does well that actually aren't that hard and that expensive. And one of them is when you're looking for a search result, it says, what is this result? So last week, and yes, I was late getting my presentation in because I sent it in last week. I was looking for a movie to go to. And so I did a movie search, and I had seen Zombieland. Now, I'm not a big, actually I ended up going to see Harriet Tubman, which was interesting. I'm not a big fantasy or science fiction person, but Zombieland had quite a cast. So I searched for Zombieland, and the first thing Google does is gives you a list of results of when the movie times are. And guess what? When you click on the movie times, you can reserve the movie. Think about that. I have a job to do. I have something I'm going to do. Google recognizes that that result is a movie, and that what it responds back with is the information I need to understand the movie, plus the ability to take an action on it, right? Down at the bottom, we've got one of these lovely title with links and some text. But what Google's doing up front and up top, right up there, is saying, I know what a movie is. I'm not searching for a string, I'm searching for a thing, a movie. I recognize that, and I recognize what someone would do with a movie. Does that make sense? A little different way of thinking about your search results. Let's do one we did with a customer. So I was working with a international pharmaceutical company in Brussels. And we've got two examples from the work we did here. And by the way, I'm horrible at drawing. That's what my stuff looks like. On the right is what someone who actually knows how to do user interface design looks like. And we said, what are the problems? And one of the things they said is we were speaking to someone in marketing, and this person said, well, when I'm looking at a piece that we're putting out for marketing, I want to know if it's right. How do I find the right thing? So if it's about neurology, how do I find what's there? Right? So that was the problem. We said, well, a person is one of your search results, and there's information you're going to need. What do you need to know to be able to answer your question? Because that's what's slowing you down, so that you can get your marketing literature approved and out the door, right? I'm looking for a person, so as I look for them, I want to know what their expertise is. Yannick Lilly is a neurology associate in the Department of Neurology. Chances are she's going to be able to help me. What's the very next thing I'm likely to do? I probably want to contact her. If you notice on this search result, there's 5 different ways to contact that person. 5 ways. Any way you can imagine, every way we could dream up, because that was an action we wanted to take. I'm helping this person get their job done, right? We also had 2 other things that were important because they were multinational. One, we had their location. And we've had to do this for a number of customers, because if you think about it, that location, time zones, right? You don't want to call this person, they have an office in Atlanta, an office in Brussels. That's 6 hours different, right? You want to know who you're calling and where they are so that you don't call them after hours, right? Because it could be their cell phone. And then languages. Because they spoke so many languages, you wanted to know which ones they spoke so you could contact them. So again, we looked at a search result. We identified it as a thing, a person. And then we talked about what would you need to do? Why would you want to talk to a person, and what would we support there? So that's number 1. Number 2, and this was kind of set up in the way we do it. So when we do our workshops to help kind of fix search problems, and we talk about action-oriented search, we do 1.5-hour long sessions with different groups. It's an 1.5 hours. Well, the place we were in has a brand new, very cool building. I mean, it's cutting edge, beautiful, and conference rooms everywhere with neat names to it, right? They have names of famous people. And so we went into our third conference room for our next one, for our next hour-and-a-half session. No chairs. Like, it had like round seating and like steps, but it was very cool for what it was doing, but we were like, well, this is going to be uncomfortable. So we all stood and sat, and like everyone tried to rest while they could. And as we said, what would help you in your daily thing? Someone said, man, I wish I wouldn't have picked this conference room. I wish I'd picked something else. So we said, a conference room is a thing. Let's talk about what that should expose. So what you'll see here is, and of course this was important to them, maybe less so in other places, a picture of the room. The schedule, right? The floor map. Where on the floor is it? What amenities does it offer, and how big is it, right? And I can book it, right? So all of a sudden, as we talk about the different search results, now, you have thousands of types of search results. We don't do all of them, but you do some of your more important ones, and it makes a big difference, and then over time, you pick more. This isn't something you have to do all at once or right away. But now we're starting to talk about things and what people want to do with things. So once we've changed our mindset from searches looking for words and documents to searches looking for information as things, now we're heading into knowledge graph land. So how many people know what a knowledge graph is, familiar with graph databases? A little bit? Ontologies? Nice. Okay. Good, then I will try not to go too remedial on that as to not bore you. But knowledge graph is really a network of things and how they're related. And this, it's what Google is basing search on in the future. Google's knowledge graph is based on Google is basing search, betting search on knowledge graphs. Anyone use LinkedIn here? Knowledge graph. Anyone use Alexa? Knowledge graph. Google Home? Knowledge graph. We can keep going. That's how this happens. This stuff is important. It's changing the way we do search. So what is a knowledge graph? And we like to break it into component parts. And I'm talking more, not talking about Alexa here, right? Going to talk a bit more about what you might see in your own enterprise. It's built on a couple things. You start with your content sources. And here's what's neat. In the old days when we did search, we'd write indexing routines and put it in our search tool. And you couldn't really read that because it was an index. It wasn't meant to work with. Knowledge graphs are built on graph databases. Things we know how to query and work with, right? Very powerful. So we look for those data sources for which we want to pull information out of. We still do taxonomies. My business partner has always been a taxonomist, and I used to joke with him that's old school. But the reality is you really cannot do this without having good, strong ways to classify information. You still need to classify it. Now you're talking about relationships, but you're classifying it. All this gets modeled in a business ontology. So an ontology is, and I've heard people confuse taxonomies and ontologies, and I really want to call out the difference here because it's important. An ontology is a model of the way things are related to one another. A taxonomy is a set of categorized lists, potentially hierarchical, that allow you to categorize your information. They work well together. Don't do one without the other, but make sure you understand that the two are different. Now, graph databases, they're I think in the last slide, they're supposed to grow by 200% in the next few years. Anyone ever heard of the term triple store? Okay, you know what it is? Do you know why it's called that? So not everyone did. The reason it's called a triple store is because you store three pieces of information. Subject, predicate, object, right? So I work for a consulting firm. What do I care about? I care about people, our team. I care about our customers. These are things, right? I care about the projects they're on, right? So Joe Hilger is a person who works on, that's the predicate, that's the relationship, such and such a project, right? So you get all these techies saying, oh, it's a triple store, this and that. That's what this is about. So the content sources is where you get your information. Taxonomy is how you categorize it. Ontology is really the modeling and design, and the graph database is where you store it. Together, you've got a knowledge graph. So let's talk about knowledge graphs in relation to search and why they're helpful. I like to think there's 4 primary drivers that really enhance search. The first is understanding context. Wouldn't it be nice to know that I'm a person when you search for me, right? Or that this is a building? That seems like that would improve search. Natural language search. I talked about Alexa. I talked about Google Home. You understand that if you start storing information, subject, predicate, object, and we did this for some clients. They're like, okay, you've done this. Now we want a chatbot. Now we want natural language search. We're like, okay. We're already storing it that way. The way you speak is how you do this. This is why Google and everyone is using this advantage. Structured and unstructured information. How many times have we been sold the idea that we can mix structured and unstructured information, right? And you go, well, where is that? How's that happen? Well, remember, in a knowledge graph, you can write a report. That's a thing. Is based on. That's a predicate. This data set, it's another thing. Now I can start to say, here's the report, here's the associated data set. This is a tool that allows you to really manage this and pull it together. And lastly, aggregation. I can pull from all these sources and have it in a managed place where I can get all this stuff to work together. So let's look at a couple examples of how this changes search. This is a graph search we did for a customer out on the West Coast. And what you'll see here is on the right-hand side, we're starting to do analytics because it's a database. You can search that database. You can query it. Where we used to have SQL in a database, they have Sparkle in graph databases. But now you can do a lot more than just your classic search. But look at the type ahead. I'm searching for Buck. And Josephine Buck, for our client, is both a very important person who's frequently quoted in documents, scientist, not the same client I mentioned before, by the way, and an author of documents. Understanding that Josephine Buck has 2 different contexts, understanding who and what she is, allows me to look at things in a different way. If I wanted to see the topics that Josephine Buck's talking about, if I filter to just Josephine Buck as an author, then I know I'm going to get the things she wrote. If I just look at things where she's quoted, it could be a long thing with other topics that aren't relevant to her, right? So understanding that context is key. Moving forward, solar, right? This is another thing. They were looking at their project database. Well, maybe it's a project I want to look for, and there's a project called solar-powered vehicle. That was one of the things they were doing on this project. Or it's a topic I want to learn more about, right? But I've added context. I know what this is. So imagine mixing the action-oriented search I talked with before with the context of knowing exactly what it is that I'm looking at, right? That changes the way people search. Now we're connecting in a way we've never done before, and it creates a great discovery experience. Speaking of that, I wanted to go back to the movie search. And I wanted to give you a sense of what you can do for discovery, and this is something you can all look and show your bosses or anyone. Going back to Zombieland search. I'm on Google. Yes, it was Halloween. Shame on me. And I searched for Zombieland. I get the page we talked about. Left-hand side is the movies. I can pick the date I might want to go, etc. Beneath that are videos. This is all driven by the knowledge graph. What you see on the right-hand side is really the instantiation of their knowledge graph. You have the critics' reviews. They've aggregated information. But I also have, down low, the cast. And you know what? I'm a big Woody Harrelson fan. This is actually why I ended up looking at this. So I click on this, and I see the cast above because it's captured those relationships. This person was in this movie. I can look at Luke Wilson, who I've always found funny, but I'm going back and I'm going to really look at Woody Harrelson. As I scroll down, I'm really discovering, I'm getting to really go through a wonderful experience. I click on Cheers because I loved that show. Here's all the things he was in, movies and TVs for Cheers. And I said, oh, well, maybe not Cheers. Maybe I'll look at Hunger Games. My kids liked that. I'm in Hunger Games. I can go through and see Jennifer Lawrence, the star of that. All those relationships, I navigated the graph. Right? A little different than your normal search experience. Is that like your internet? No? It's not that hard, actually, once you've got the graph behind it. So that's it. I think I've gone over, and I'm going to let, I'll take questions at the end.